So hello guys and welcome again to this standard deck tech video with Brothers War. So this deck tech that will reintroduce in a way because it was one of my list of the deck builds during the previous season of the Brothers War, and this time we're having sort of an update of what the build would look like now that we have already Brothers War is legal to play in the standard format. Again, we're going to look at that deck, which we call this time as the blue-white robots or our Urza Prince of Krog deck, built around this, not sort of a build around, but not really going with just purely buff of Urza, but also have its own each card's functionalities and role in this build. So we go with this deck name, which is now called as the Urza Agro, or the Blue Urza Agro Robots deck update, which we got this updated list from MTG Goldfish. So now we have 30 creatures in the lineup, 3 enchantments, 3 instants, and 23 lands in the process, along with the sorcery and also a sideboard list. So we now have a sideboard deck set up for this, which we will discuss in the last part of this video. Now we go first with the creature choices in the lineup. First is Armguard Familiar. This is to cast Artifact Creature Equipment Beast, which has this power for 2/1 but has a ward of 2. And equipped creature gets +2/+1 and has ward of 2. At the same time, you can pay for its reconfigure cost by paying for colorless or any color attached to target creature you control. Or you may also pay the same mana value for unattaching from it. So it is only the sorcery speed, but once it is attached, this one is not a creature. So it goes with the 2 drops, and also a good attachment in the late game to buff up your best creature in your board. So along with this 2 copies of this Armguard Familiar, we also have 4 copies of Autonomous Assembler. This is a prototype artifact assembly creature type, wherein you can initially pay it for just 1 white in 1 generic mana for a 2/2, which still has this ability that it has vigilance and pay 1 tap, put up some counter on target assembly creature assembly worker you control. At the same time, if you go wide with the hard casting it for 5, you can just pay 5 of any mana or colorless mana to have this one as a 4/5 instead of a 2/2. So it's basically good as a 2-drop and as a late drop at the same time. So that's why we have 4 copies of this in the deck. Next, we also have another construct type of creature. This is just an uncommon, the Combat Treasure, with the 7 hard cast for a 3/3, or go with a prototype for a 3 to cast 1/1, in which when it enters the battlefield, you will draw a card. At the same time, there's a double strike, which benefit more if you get to reconfigure the one that was mentioned earlier to have this one become a 3/2 double striker in the setup. So again, prototypes has 2 options. You can go easy with the small casting cost, and as the late game, if you were able to reach 7 mana, you can just hard cast this one for a bigger power and toughness, and at the same time have the same abilities equipped. Now we also have Hot Shot Mechanic. So this basically this 1 drop of this deck, which is also an artifact creature and the same, in which it can crew vehicles as though its power were 2 or greater. At the same time, if no vehicles are around, you can just basically have this one attacking for 2, and can also be buffed by Urza Prince of Krogs as passive ability. So we have 4 copies of this in the deck. And then we also have Iron Apprentice. This one reminds me of the old assembly worker from Mirrodin. So it has basically the same functionality. It is a 1 to cast for generic mana or colorless. It enters the battlefild with a +1 counter, and if it dies, if it had counters on it, you may put those counters on target creature you control. So you can also go with the buff, and also if we were ever to die in combat or die for spot removal, you can just transfer the +1 counters added on it to another creature that will be benefit of this. Now, for along with these 4 copies of Iron Apprentice, we also have 4 copies of Patchwork Automaton. This is from also Kamigawa and Density, which is quite the scene of most of the artifact-based decks in the past. So it was also having 4 copies of this in the deck. wherein you can just have this ability to have this one bigger as long as you're casting an artifact spell. At the same time, it can protect itself by having this ward 2 ability of a whenever it's targeted. So this one is also coupled with the 3-drop or probably the 6-drop prototype angel for this deck, with us also having this one as 4 copies. The option of just to have is a 3 to cast 3 flying, with also this ability that being combat of your turn, target creature control gains the choice of flying, vigilance, lifelink, and goes well with the curve along with your password automaton, your headshot mechanic, and the like. Hence, this is also the option, gives us the option to have this one casted on 3rd turn or 6th turn, depending on the situation. Again, for Urza Prince of Krog, let us check this ability that aside from having your buff for your artifact creatures, you can also pay 6 to create a token as a copy of target artifact you control. Except that it's becomes a 2/1/1 soldier creature in addition to its other types. So basically, summoning 1/1 soldier creature, but basically having this buff, would instead have those soldier tokens becomes 3/3 with Urza's ability. So 2 copies of this, to making sure we'll go with the mid to late game to draw this one, because of already the mana cost, it is 4. We can just expect that by turn 4 you can hard cast this one, or wait just to have the bonus buff in situations wherein you can be gaining advantage of your board. Also, another one draft for this deck is the Yuchan Frontliner. You've noticed this one is already used in Soldier's deck in the metagame. So remember, it's also an artifact creature, so benefit again for Urza Prince of Krog's ability. And not only that it becomes a 1/1, but it also gives you a buff to your other creatures whenever it attacks. And then you also have the unearthed power to just pay 1 white mana to unearth this creature. So that goes with the 30 creatures. And along with Urza's passive buff ability, we also have 3 in the trenches to have this glorious anthem effect. And at the same time, a good mana sink in the late game by exiling target non-permanent or a threat of your opponents in your board, and until the in the trenches leaves the battlefield, is the targeted permanent or non-permanent will still remain in exile. And the drawback is that you can only activate this one as a sorcery and only once, but still this is a good built-in removal, wherein in dire situations you would need to exile those non-permanents that are relevant or against your board in the setup. Now for the support, we have 1 copy of Forging the Anchor. There's this sorcery wherein you can look at the top 5 cards of library. You may reveal any number of artifact cards and put those cards in your hand. At the same time, those other cards that was not revealed will then be placed into your bottom of the library in any order. But the good thing is that given that this build is mostly composed of artifact decks, you can basically have at max 5 cards drawn for this sorcery. So to make sure that we have only 1 copy of this in the deck, because of situations wherein you can just have this one as a gas if there are at times that your opponent may have board sweep your initial attackers, then you can have Forging Anchor to refill your hand and cast more of your threats. Now for just the instant, you can basically mention here is that Fading Hope, because of the solid bounce removal, and at the same time you can have the bonus of Scry 1 to filter out your next draws, especially important in a aggro deck if the target of that spell is 3 or less in the mana value. Now for the lands, you can see that they're basic type, the usual stuff that we add in this build, which are the Pain Lands, Darker Waste 4 copies, Deserted Beach also 4 copies of this, and we also this one is just 2, maybe because of the conditional tap on the third one. And we also have the Iganjo State of the Empire as our utility channel land from Kamigawa. And of course, basic lands of islands in plates, since you can notice most are probably are white mana cost, so we have 8 planes in the setup. And then we also have another utility card, Itawara, And last but not the least are your assembly workers or your manlands for Urza Mishra's Foundry, wherein you can just basically add not only colors mana but also activate this one to become a 2/2 assembly worker and make attack for added damage. And the bonus, of course, you can have this one attacking assembly worker gets +2/+2 until end turn. Notice we have this one. 4 copies. This is also an assembly worker, so this can be also targeted by Mishra's Foundry's ability. And situations we can have bonus damage for this setup. Now for your sideboard, these are basically basic, and we just want to have a quick rundown on this. 1 copy of Armor's Familiar, maybe for added threats for your turn drops. 2 copies of the Populate for aggro scenarios, also for, let's say, for mono black, for mono red aggro, red green, wherein if you may have them overcommit their board and then you swipe it out and do your aggro on your turn. 1 copy of Destroy Evil for utility of this one, for toughness of greater or target enchantment. 1 copy of the Sinful Stroke for decks such as having mass removals or having hard cast spells such as Burn Down the House and Farewell. We also have 2 copies of Essence Scatter. I think this one is for other mid-range decks that may have threats that you want not really easy to deal with. We can say Shield Red, other threats that Titan maybe can be countered this one. We also have 2 copies of Blade Down Arms. This one is for cheap slot removal, since most of your deck planes in the land lineup. You can have this one to just quick spot removal to mitigate your opponent's aggro. So basically you can just place one against your mirror, against mono red, against other red green or white based aggro per se. We also have 2 copies of Lawrence Escape. This is the new God's Willing, wherein you can also protect your artifact creature to gain Hexproof and Invisible, and the bonus also of Scry 1. 2 copies of Spell Pierce. This is also for mid-range decks or maybe for mono blue, wherein you will just counter their counter spells or counter their spot removals for only 1 blue mana. And Tokasha's Welcome. This is probably the last one in the list. We have this ability wherein whenever one of our creatures with mana value 3 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you will draw a card. Now this ability only triggers once this turn, but the important thing is that you will still consider to draw gas if you're casting or recording creatures with mana value 3 or less that enters your battlefield under your control. For the final part, we will go with the deck stats. Average mana value is 2.84. Blue producers, blue pips 8, and white are mostly the dominating color of this one, so we have 12. But the producers would be enough to make sure that you are curving well with the color of white starting from their first turn. So we have 15, and for blue it's 11. So tokens, this deck has no tokens. That's quite surprisingly, but I think this one would with this ability of Urza, we can say that we can create a copy token that's a copy of any targeted artifact you control. So I guess that's about it for this updated deck select for Urza Grow. I do hope you like this content, and if you do, just click on the subscribe button on the lower right, and also turn on the bell for notifications. And if you ever try this one in your daily grind in MTG Arena or MTG Online, just please let me know in the comments below as what your assessment on this build. Maybe you're going with it in the trenches or going well with more creatures instead. Maybe cut off the Fading Hope and add more Forging the Anchor to card draw, or maybe Tokasha's Welcome. It depends on what your idea of your supposedly expected metagame in this format. And so just let me know in the comments. I guess thank you for watching this video, and until the next time guys, for the next Brothers War and card updates and deck decks as per se. Thank you for watching guys, and until next time.